The right to offend is not some pesky little part of freedom of speech that we have to put up with. It is the heart and soul and lungs of freedom of speech. It is the coursing lifeblood of human progress. It is the instigator of liberty and modernity and science and understanding. What a laughing stock today's student leaders are, that they can so casually dismiss the right to be offensive without realizing that their lovely, enlightened lives are the gift of individuals who gave offense. Offensiveness is not just something we have to begrudgingly accept. Offensiveness is the motor of human progress.
Now broadcasting from the Right to Offend Media Studios in sunny South Florida, bringing you the latest in politics, current events, art, and pop culture. This is the Whitfield Report Live with Sam Whitfield.
But giving offense is good. In fact, it's essential.
Alrighty, folks, and welcome to today's Monday edition of the Whitfield Report. I am your host, Sam Whitfield, recording here from Right to Offend Media Studios in sunny South Florida. And joining me from an undisclosed location is Henry Brown, aka Machine Trooper, author of the Tier Zero series and other action thrillers. Like many of my guests, I know Henry through the men's adventure fiction community. He and I were both on a podcast hosted by Ryan Permson a few weeks ago. And, we've chatted a bit and hit it off. And he has a pretty extensive body of work, so I just figured I would invite him on. He writes great stuff. Tier Zero is awesome, and I just wanted to have him on. So, Henry, thanks for joining us. How are you today?
I'm good, a little sleep deprived, but otherwise good, and I appreciate you having me on, Sam.
I understand that. I've been, promoting books myself, and that always happens, sometimes when you're grinding. So first off, sir, I guess just kind of what is your background in general, and what motivated you to get into writing in the first place?
Well, I guess I've always been a creative person, even into my childhood. Some of that was because I was raised in situations where I had to entertain myself for long periods of time, and I did have an active imagination. But I started out drawing, not writing. I wanted to eventually make comic books. As time went on, I heard more and more adults telling me that if you want to be, a serious creative, that, prose is the way to go, novels. And I did start, I found writing as more of a challenge at first. And I started transitioning, and eventually I stopped drawing altogether and kept writing. And most of the stuff I've written has never been published and never will be published. But my debut novel is Hell and Gone right there. That's the first one in the Retread series. I actually wrote it, and I had pretty much a polished draft 10 years, well, no, more like 8 years before it was finally published. And from there, I made, every possible mistake you can make getting into the book biz at that time. I made it. So I didn't, when I started, I had just found out about, ebooks and print on demand, the way the industry was being revolutionized. And it was I caught it at the tail end of the Wild West days of self-publishing, indie publishing. And if I had made some better decisions, I would probably be in a better position now. But anyway, the book picked up some readers and some fans. And at first it was meant to be standalone. But some fans said they wanted a sequel. And so I wrote Tier Zero as number 2 in the series, and then picked up some more fans. And, I was encouraged by some of the things they said. It's still I mean, right now getting reviews on Amazon is like pulling teeth, and back then it was difficult too, but not quite as
Yeah.
hard. And so I got some good reviews on that, and they wanted more. And so I transitioned it from retro men's adventure to kind of a not post-apocalyptic, but SHTF uh, genre with the same characters, and that was False Flag. I had intended to continue the series into a post-apocalyptic setting, um, but I got buried down with other stuff to do, life happening, uh, and then I'd been sitting on this idea for, where did I put it? Oh, it's probably can't see it. I've been sitting on this idea for a sci-fi mega magnum opus for a long time, and it finally got overpowering to the point where I had to work on that. Got interrupted several times, but anyway, finally finished it. It's the Paradox series. There's 6 books in it. That's also available in ebook and in print. Sci-fi, time travel, men's adventure, sports fiction, conspiracy thriller, all wrapped into one. It was a lot of fun to write. I am pretty satisfied. It was both cathartic, therapeutic, and it's actually it's picking up the kind of fans that I wanted for it in the first place. So that's in a nutshell. Oh, and right now I'm working on a graphic novel, and that's one reason why I don't have time to read or watch movies anymore. I'm just all my time is going into coloring and lettering the inks to get that graphic novel ready for publication.
Wow. Yeah, that so you're actually the first graphic novelist then I've actually had on the podcast, and I'll be
Oh, cool.
curious to ask you more about that. So, like me then, it seems like you write in various um genres then. And I certainly understand the need to, to kind of bounce back and forth between genres. Like you, I kind of have like a military slash spy thriller series and universe, but then I also have my crime fiction universe, which I initially intended to uh publish Shadows of Deception and have that kind of be my main series. But it seems like a lot. It seems like my crime fiction work too. Both works I think are good, but they both have like separate audiences too. And I only bring that up because I'm I like both of your series. I'm curious to know uh with authors who have multiple series who write across different genres. Do you tend to get more feedback on one series versus another? Are people like, hey, I like the Paradox series more than the Retreads books, or vice versa? What have you noticed with that?
Well, 2 things that might sound contradictory. First of all, I've got a lot more fans and a lot more reviews. A lot more people have commented on the Retread series, which might be because it's been around longer, and because the the algorithms hadn't been as bad for non-communist indie authors
Yeah,
back when I published them. But however, Hans G. Schantz, who wrote the his book was The Hidden Truth. So I think the whole series is called The Hidden Truth. He sponsors he holds the base book sale quarterly. Anyway, he finally read. I guess he's read all mine. He hasn't reviewed anything, but uh, he really liked my Retread series. He likes the military thrillers. But he also read the entire Paradox series, and he did make a comment that uh, he thought it was even better than my military thrillers. Which he's more of a sci-fi guy, so that kind of makes sense. Maybe it's more in his wheelhouse. But anyway, I wish he'd put it in the form of a review where people could see it.
yeah. Well, that's awesome. Our I take it then, are you a fan of his work then?
Actually, so again, I don't have time to read as much as I used to, or as much as I
Right.
want to. But I did read the first book in his series, The Hidden Truth, and I bought the second one, but I haven't read it yet. And The Hidden Truth really was, I really enjoyed it. It was right up my alley. And what
Yeah, I
fascinated
mean,
me was that he and I were exploring a lot of the same themes. We had the stories are completely different, but um, we kind of the same ideas. I guess we're driving both his narrative and mine.
yeah, I think that's always I think that's always good when you can find authors who, you know, they're doing different things but like, kind of in the same vein. And I mean, for me it's been very humbling for, some of the indie authors who I've read and I've read their work and admired it, and then they pick up some of my work and some of them think it's good, and it's always a really, not surprising in like a bad way, but like wow, I've admired this person's work, and now they think I'm good. And in regards to not having time to read, I mean, I kind of understand where you're coming from too. I'm kind of in that mode of basically everything I read is either my own work or stuff that I'm helping to proofread and edit for others. So I certainly understand that grind as well. Um, since you do have a graphic novel, I'm curious because I know that as someone who I've never like drawn comic books, but I am a comic book collector myself, so I do
Are you?
appreciate
Okay.
the I basically spent my childhood and teen years in a comic book store, and I've met some artists, so I really appreciate how much effort goes into actually making a comic book. So what really drove you to make the transition from just writing to doing a full blown comic book? Because it is a labor of love. I know
It
that.
is, yeah. And odds are really against you making a profit. After you get it all produced, it's really expensive, especially if it's color, and
Well,
this one
yeah.
is. So to answer that question, it's kind of a long story, but I'll try to truncate it. I was, of course, I was in the middle of the usual. So, yeah, I actually had gotten back to the Paradox series. It was interrupted several times because of life and stuff that happened career wise, and personal tragedies and so forth. Other projects, but I was working mostly on that, and the social media. I had quit my uh, Facebook and Twitter accounts back in like 2013, sort of. So, and I just quit them cold turkey and hadn't reactivated Twitter yet, or my Twitter account. So my social media was between Gab and MeWe. Anyway, I went on Gab and I got uh, I got like 3,000 followers on there, but it's not it's become a platform that's not so good for creative sharing. It's more all about politics.
Right.
So it's less useful to me as a creator. And all that as a background to say that I get personal messages or direct messages now and then, and I got one time from somebody I didn't know. He wasn't a friend of mine, but he asked me. Well, he said, "Hey, Henry, I like your prose. Have you ever considered graphic novels?" Um, and I was skeptical at first. This is the whole something like this, something similar to this, is the whole reason I'm on social media in the first place, is to have something like this happen. But I was like, what is he talking about? He must be trying to sell me something. That was my initial take on it.
Right.
But I messaged him back and I said, I forget what I said, But anyway, our conversation kept going, and it became more and more clear that it turns out he's a publisher, a small publisher, and European based, but he was looking to have me write a graphic novel. And, which is, wow, out of the blue. I wasn't even looking for this guy. Kind of dropped in my lap. And we started talking back and forth, and I told him, I used to draw, but I lost my patience and my hand-eye coordination for drawing, but I still have all my bad habits. So, but he was like, okay with that. We'll find an artist, if you want to write. And I did. And I wrote a script for him. It was a sci-fi script, and I still hope to get this produced someday. But I also had in mind a superhero series of graphic novels. Anyway, so I got going on the sci-fi script, and he found an artist and shared some sample art, some sample sequential art, like the first page or so. And anyway, since he had to foot the bill, he was trying to negotiate for better prices, and he ended up, passing on that artist and finding another one, even though that artist did some really good work. And then and this had gone on for, I don't know, I think looking back, all this might have taken place over less than a year. But then he just disappeared off the face of the earth. The publisher did. To try to make the long story short, even though that fell through for whatever reason, the bug had bit me. Again, this was a childhood ambition of mine, was to produce comic books. And so I got excited when, it looked like it was going to become reality. And then so afterwards, I was like, well, you know what? I know a little bit more about the industry now because of what I learned through him. Why don't I got to do it. It's on my bucket list. So, and then this nightmare comedy of errors happened, trying to find artists who are dependable, would actually try to draw what you asked them to, who weren't out to just grift me out of money. It was really horrific. And I got a really, really bad opinion, a really bad taste in my mouth from all the artists I came into contact with, or I shouldn't say all, most.
Right.
And anyway, long story short, someone suggested, why don't you use AI? So I looked into that for a while. And then at one point I actually bought some software because I thought the only way this is going to get done is I have to learn how to draw again, and I'm going to have to do it myself, which means, even more time. It's going to be even more years before I can bring one of these to fruition. But it turns out because I was like researching the market, I was trying to plan ahead and I figured I was going to have to crowdfund, and I've never done that before. So I followed Fund My Comic I reactivated my Twitter account for another reason, but I followed Fund My Comic on there, and I joined his Discord. And if you didn't know, that's a crowdfunding site specifically for comic books. And the owner believes in free speech. It's not like Kickstarter and Indiegogo and these places who, if they decide that you're guilty of wrongthink, they'll kick you off and after your campaign's complete and not give you the money. So I was following that, trying to learn all I could about crowdfunding, about the industry in general. And after I'd been on that Discord for a while, I found a little, and by the way, I still don't really understand Discord that well. The men's adventure fiction group it's exciting to see all that stuff happen, and the stuff you were talking about earlier. Really exciting to see that happen. I wish I had time to hang out there more and like be more participatory. But anyway, this Discord group was for Fund My Comic, and after I'd been on there for a few months, they had a category called Collab Search. Collab Search. Why didn't I see that before? Is this about collaboration? Because at the time I was thinking, coming up with the page rates that some of these artists wanted was going to be prohibitive. So I thought maybe if I can find a collaborator, someone who's willing to do it because they like the project, because they like the joy of drawing, they just want to see their work out there, bringing somebody's idea to life. I thought, what the heck, I'll try it. And I gave them this really, you could tell I was jaded and I was kind of beaten down at the time, because the message I gave was some version of this. This is probably not even worth my time or yours, but what the heck? I've been trying to, there's a couple graphic novels I want to do. I've been looking for an artist, and I'm tired of the scams. I'm tired of the flakes. I'm tired of people, ghosting me or jumping ship or just not doing what I asked, what I pay them to do. So it's a glass half empty kind of message I left there. And anyway, within the hour, two artists replied to it. And one of those artists was Luke Stone himself, the one who started Fund My Comics. And I didn't know this. I had commissioned him before to do some cover art, because even though for the superhero, the first superhero graphic novel, and even though I didn't have it anywhere near ready, I was thinking, I have the money now to get some cover art, so I might as well do it. And so he had done that. So I'd worked with him a little bit, but I didn't know he did sequential art. It turns out that sequential art, the part inside the covers of the book, that's what he calls his bread and butter. So at that time, he was making his living doing that on commission. So I talked with him and this other artist had a better page rate, but Luke Stone's page rate was still very reasonable for today's market. It still hurts. It was a financial pain. It hurt paying it, but it's very reasonable by today's standards, especially in America for an American artist. And I chose him. The other guy had a better page rate, but I chose him because I'd been watching his podcast for a while, again, trying to research and learn stuff about crowdfunding and about the industry in general. And I thought I had a pretty good idea what his character is. And so I went with him, and that's how I made that's a shortened version of how I made the transition back to graphic novels. And I still hope to get the sci-fi graphic novel done someday. I actually have a few pages of it up on ArcTunes where people can look at it for free, but I had to abandon it when that artist jumped ship after anyway, he jumped ship when he found greener pastures, someone else, and the agreement that I had with him was apparently not worth the breath he gave it with.
Yeah, that's always a bummer. I haven't had that experience with artists, but I had that experience with an audiobook narrator who I was working with for one of my crime fiction books, and it kind of sucked. And he had initially agreed to work with me, and then I guess because this this gentleman, he found out that he and I have differing political views. It wasn't
I tell you,
anything
Sam,
that,
I've run into that several times. That's like half the artists would not work with me because of that.
yeah, me too. And I think and most people listen to my podcast know that I'm a conservative, and I think I don't want to label you, but it seems like you and I have very similar viewpoints in that. But I'm not someone who kind of brings my politics into my work as a writer, and yet some people, especially non Americans, sometimes they think that I'm like some far right guy when I'm really not. And so one narrator dropped me, but then another narrator who had never recorded anything before. It was his first audiobook. Really wanted to do the project, and it took. He just finished the project. It's not out on Audible yet, but it's it's better actually than what the other guy had put out initially. So everything
Well, that
kind of
worked out.
worked out well
Yeah.
as far as that goes. But yeah, I mean, definitely the comics industry, at least I've, noticed even in my lifetime, I mean, and just it's not as bad in like book publishing, I guess, but now there's like a huge or there was a civil war between like the woke and non-woke in comics. And you know, I I'm I'm glad to see that there are indie comic companies out there, but I wish there were more, because I think you know like producing a comic book can be very expensive, and you're not
Yes.
like if you're not Marvel or DC, who can do all that stuff in house, or even like a moderately sized comic book, company, it's going to be like way harder to produce things. So
Well, not only that, but they can, and this is a problem a lot of readers have who are still stuck on the old system, and where the big two dominated, Marvel and DC dominated everything in the American comics business, is that they're owned by big mega conglomerates who can buy
yeah,
stuff in bulk and order stuff in bulk, and they can get a cheaper counter price or cheaper shelf price than any indie can. So that's something else. It's another thing that puts the odds against indie creators getting any traction, is because the cost is so much more expensive for us. And although, at least in my case, I believe my quality is going to be so much better than anything Marvel or DC are putting out currently, the
yeah,
there's people who are going to look at the price and look at my name and say, I don't know him. He's not in comics. Uh, and it's going to be a harder decision for them to go ahead and hit that buy button or back button.
yeah, yeah. That's definitely a challenge. I think even like in just book publishing, I don't think people understand that. Uh, even though my paperbacks are 12 $12 or something, we only get like a fraction of what Amazon pays, which I think is fair, because part of buying a book does go into, printing, um,
Right.
and distribution
Oh,
and
you're
all
talking
that.
about
So
paperbacks.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
or just print books in general. I think it's fair, but I don't think consumers necessarily realize that,
Right.
hey, when you buy a book off Amazon, we're not getting you know, the entire $25 or whatever it is
Yeah.
that you're paying.
When you're
Um,
talking print books, it's well, of course, the tradpub, the traditionally published authors have it even worse than we do. We get
yeah,
we get a small chunk of the cover price, but they get an even smaller chunk. Like they get pennies on the dollar for any books that they wrote getting sold.
yeah, and unless you're someone like, Stephen King or
Right.
something like a lot of authors, I know, have been on the show, like a lot of them, I know I bring him up a lot, but like Eric P. Bishop is like a prime example of someone who he was with Force Poseidon, and same thing with Steve Stratton, and they both got like a pretty good deal, as far as like distribution, but then Force Poseidon, I guess, went out of business, and they were able to get the rights back to their characters, and they've made way more as indie authors, um just basically republishing their books under their own brand. So it's impressive.
That's
Um,
really the best position to be in right now. If you already established a reputation and an audience under the old trad pub system. So you're grandfathered
Yeah,
in past the current gatekeepers. Now you've got a following, and you can go to indie, and all the advantages are in indie now because the trad pub's not going to market for you anymore. So
it
why not?
it's it's not even that. The thing that is really interesting to me is, again, unless you're part of that top, 2% of authors or whatnot in the traditional publishing market, most authors who are in traditional publishing, they have to do the same stuff that we do as indie authors, and as far as like going on podcasts, booking their own media, producing their own social media posts. So it's kind of like,
Showing their face.
yeah, at that point, why? At that point, it's like, okay, well, why bother? Even trying to do traditional, finding an agent or doing, traditional publishing. So, um, well, I am curious too. I know I've kind of gone a little bit out of order, but I am curious. Who were your biggest influences as far as writing in both, I guess, books and comic books? And then, since you are into comic book art too, I've never been able to ask another, guest this, but like, who are your favorite artists and kind of your favorite comic book styles as well that have influenced you?
I'm better than I used to be, but I never really paid attention. I don't know why this is, but I never really paid attention to the artists and writers' names of stuff that I liked when I was really young. I'm better now, and I read such a variety of different stuff when I was a kid, and I know, excuse me, a lot of it influenced me. Lynn Levinson, who I talked about last time, he's
Yeah,
definitely an influence. I catch myself kind of saying, may, well, I think it's because his characters are kind of fatalistic, and I am fairly fatalistic as well, which is, but I'm sure he influenced me. Some of the works of course, and I've read Louis L'Amour, and I like his work. Although it does tend to be formulaic. I don't think, I don't know how much he influenced me. If my father had written, that would have been a big influence for him for sure. Edgar Rice Burroughs, um, oh, um, dang it, guy that wrote Perry Mason, Earl Stanley Gardner, the classic pulp authors, of course, Robert E. Howard being, that's my favorite fantasy. I maybe I shouldn't say this, but I never really got into Tolkien the way a lot of people today have.
yeah,
For me, I was always more of a Howard guy, um, and not just Conan, but I mean, obviously Conan's at the top of my list. But
yeah.
I liked some of his Sailor Steve. Did he write the Sailor Steve Costigan stories? He wrote some
Uh,
boxing fiction.
yeah, I think so.
Okay, yeah, I'm not sure if that was him or someone else, but I enjoyed those. Always been an action adventure guy, and that was more available when I was a kid than it is now for sure. You could actually still find some reprints, and some people were still publishing newer stuff. Uh, when I was a kid, but that got cut off. Um, in comic books, again, the artists, I've become so word oriented, so prose oriented that I haven't paid attention to artists like I should. But I know one of the comic book artists, the comic book writers that did some stories that I just loved was Doug Minch, and it's spelled Moench. I just thought some of his stories were fantastic. The ones that I read, he did Moon Knight, and he did either Batman or Detective Comics for quite a while.
Yeah,
It turns out and this was back in the day before they started throwing their leftist dogma, cramming it in everybody's noses. And he's one of them. I found out when I listened to or I read the transcript of an interview from him. But for the most part, he didn't let that ruin his stories to the extent that writers are doing now. I guess because you can say he's a professional. He's a professional, and
Right.
that was something they left it at home, or they weren't so obnoxious about it that it turned people off. And speaking of professionals, I should have said this when I mentioned uh, Luke Stone. Where's my head today? Luke Stone. He is a professional. He's a former Democrat. Now he's a libertarian. But I asked him, right up the front. I said, "Hey, I'm a right winger, and I'm not preaching at anybody with this story, but I am going to make some observations, or the story is going to make some observations
Yeah.
that a lot of people probably will be offended that I make." Um, and he left his politics at the door, and he did, for the most part. He gave me what I wanted throughout the whole thing. So kudos to him, because there's not many people who can do that anymore.
Well, one of the things that I've said, and you seem to be a reasonable guy. I've talked to you enough. You seem very reasonable. I tell people all the time. I've told the guy in the men's adventure fiction Discord too. I feel like it's impossible for everyone. It's impossible for people to leave their beliefs and their observations out of their work to some extent, because I feel like if you're writing or doing anything creative, especially with storytelling, your beliefs are going to come out. My problem, and I think a lot of the problems that a lot of other people have, I don't even have problems with necessarily liberals putting out their opinions. My problem, and there are actually some conservatives who, not as much in comic books that drive me crazy with this, because there are so far few of us, but people that just in general bash, like, bash people's heads in with their where it's so overtly political that it's kind of like a preaching session, and it's like, okay, well, if I want that, I'll go and watch like Tucker Carlson or MSNBC or what have you. So I guess since you're not as into artists, let me ask you, I guess, the same question a different way. Are there any specific stories that have stood out to you that made you think wow, I want to become a writer? Like, I remember one of mine growing up was when I first read Frank Miller's The Dark Knight, you know
Oh, okay.
Returns. Like, I was a kid, and like, Frank Miller's name didn't mean, it didn't really mean anything to me until much later. But like, that story early on was like one of the ones that I was like, wow, I want to tell stories like this one day, even if it's not in the superhero genre. So I guess since you're more historian, did any I guess particular stories that influence you or anything like that?
As far as coming up with someone who some work of art, or some person who inspired me to be a writer, I couldn't narrow it down to any single one. It's kind of, and you know, I went through a phase where I put my creativity on hold to serve my country, and to play sports and things like that. But from a pretty young age, I knew that I wanted to do something creative. So it wasn't any one book or any one movie or anything like that that made me want to do it. It was just it seemed like the natural path for me to take. And of course, I've been working dead end blue collar loser jobs for most of my adult life, and I
Right.
only relatively recently got to the point where I could get my work out there for people to look at. But that's always been on my agenda. It's always been an ambition of mine, and I thank God that I finally got the chance to do it and met with what success I have. Uh, there was a moment. I mean, and like I said, I was already on this path, and I already had this kind of, some kind of creative masterminding uh, in the back of my mind. But I do remember I was watching it was, if I watched it now, I probably couldn't tolerate it because it was such low production values and anything. But I was watching a biopic about Bruce Lee when I was pretty young. I was 14, maybe. Um, and they got to the point in his life story where he was making his own movies, and they showed him. This is silly, but the way my brain works, sometimes it is silly. They had this scene where he was sitting down at a coffee table with some notebook paper and a ballpoint pen, uh, writing the script for his next show, and I just remember thinking, man, that's really cool. That's
Yeah, I
that's cool, and I want
yeah.
to do that.
I don't think that's silly at all. I think, creative people, I certainly have that. I think our brains kind of work. Uh, I'll be watching a scene from like a movie sometimes, and not really even like, you know, thinking with the intention of, you know, with explicitly like creating something, but like I was just telling my mom this the other day. In fact, she and I were having lunch, but she really likes my crime fiction series, and so I told her, I was like, yeah, I was watching, the first Godfather, a few months ago, which I've seen, probably like, 10, 12 times at this point in my life. But all of a sudden, you know, I was like, well, what if Michael Corleone, instead of becoming a gangster, had become like a cop, or something like that? But he was still tied in with mafia, and that's what had
Hmm.
inspired my, you know, mafia kind of pulp series, Blood Ties. Obviously it's my own creation, but just like that random, fleeting thought that I had was what kind of sparked, my idea for that. And I think just kind of like random moments like that, at least for us as creatives, I think that's kind of why creative people are, um, a bit different. And I think the other thing too that I particularly like about you is there's kind of this whole stereotype that drives me crazy that like all creative types are like these liberal, you know, I guess hipster types who, they live in, apartments in Greenwich Village, and they starve for their art and whatnot. Whereas like I really appreciate someone like, you, or even someone like, Stan Lee, Marvel Comics, who, served in the military, who worked, blue collar jobs, and who, actually, went out there and did work, and, had to, work to pay, the bills, and also, write creatively. I think, people think that the starving artist type is the only one out there. I definitely think that, blue collar
Bohemian.
creatives, or, just like working creatives, don't get as much, it's not as romantic, I guess, but, they do exist out there. So,
Right. Well, and we've certainly got experiences to drive or to motivate our muse.
yeah,
Um, and what you're talking about, it's really the double standard we have now. Um, you know, and you'll hear this from fellow people, who are right of center. That, and by the way, when I say I'm a right winger, I mean I'm using the left right political spectrum, the original one, not the way it's been taught to us by our
right.
leftist teachers. So I'm more between a libertarian and an anarchist, I guess is what you'd say. Uh, and so when people of this persuasion ran the publishing industry, it was like they did not gatekeep for ideology. So, but the other side does. And when they got power, I mean, they've proven it. And then ever since they achieved power in all the creative industries, they've been, securing their ironclad control more and more as time goes on. And readers and people who watch movies and all that, they've been getting, and the propaganda started out subtle. Um, the old movie directors and the authors and stuff used to slip in their ideology more subtly and more craftily than they do now, for sure. But readers who have been, for the last 30, 40 years, they've been reading this leftist agitprop. Um, and they consider that, because of the Overton window and all that stuff, they consider that center or neutral or
Right.
something. And then uh, someone like me comes along and pushes back from the other side, and the reaction is like, oh, that's beyond the pale. You should not do that. Well, you've been reading these other guys who've been doing it to you all your life. Why is it
Yeah.
okay for them to spread their ideology any and everywhere as hard as they can, but we have to keep a political vacuum on our side? We're not allowed to present an opposing argument. And so that double standard, it's really nauseating. Um, and frankly, which goes back to me trying to collaborate with an artist. Some people, I guess, you would consider them neutral or middle of the road or whatever, but that attitude was in them too, and they didn't want to work with me because, well, I don't want to make waves or whatever they certainly didn't phrase it that way, but I think that was what one of the motivations was. They didn't want to make themselves a target for canceling, uh, or they think the answer to the problems in the world is to stick your head in the sand and hope that things get better miraculously, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, there definitely is that, as far as, like, I guess you could say, the corporate conglomerate media, but I do feel like, uh, there is more of a pushback against all that. And I think, especially like in indie publishing, I think, you know, and I think that's really a really good thing, especially with, like, younger guys, like myself, and even, younger guys than myself, like, Jake Widmer, for example, is like, I just want to tell good stories. Like, I wasn't I wasn't like really that political, but the corporations are like telling me that, like, my views are like far right, and they're not. And so I think, just, the great thing about the indie press, and like even indie comic books, yeah, it may be more labor intensive, but I think people just crave, you know, good storytelling. And I mean, I think one of the things that is like most evident about that now is, yeah, the corporations might have more money than a lot of us indie people, but by the time people hear this interview, I think it will be like, close to like 2 weeks. But Disney just released the Snow White movie, and
Oh,
that
right. Yeah.
basically, uh, you know, nobody went and saw it. Like, it's, I think, like, The Room, which is, famously, like, that was famously an intentionally bad movie. It's got a higher rating than Snow White does. So I
Yeah.
think, like, yeah, I think, like, I think a lot of these corporations, maybe not all of them, but some of them are definitely starting to jettison, some of their political, stuff, or they're starting to, get rid of some of these politically motivated writers, because the heads are starting to realize, hey, this is killing our business. It might not be as fast as you or I would want it, but I definitely think there is starting to be a pushback. And I mean, like you said, I think now is really a good time to be in independent, press, because, you know, we're kind of the new creatives taking over everything, which I think is
Mm.
good.
On a couple of the points you made. Well, first of all, I I make no bones about it. I am a right winger, but it's not
Yeah,
like I'm like you. I want a good story, and I want to tell a good story, and that's the focus. If I'm not telling a good story, then I'm failing as a creative. So not all, you know, I do in some of my fiction. I make observations, and I depict things the way I've seen them. And some of it you wouldn't even know uh, because it is kind of it's neutral, and politics or political ideology is not relevant to the story I'm telling, so you don't see it there.
right.
And I do think there is a pushback now, and well, I don't know how many other there were. There darn sure not many, but I was trying to revive the glory days of men's adventure fiction before it was cool. But now it looks like it's getting cool. There's more and more people on that Discord all the time. There's so many comments and so much back and forth I can't even keep up with it. And I think a lot of the people, and it's good to see a lot of them just want to tell a good story. And that's a positive thing. I have
Yeah,
and most of the stuff I grew up with, the literature I grew up with, it was either leaning to the left or it was apolitical, and nothing like that really came up. And I think those were good days. I would like to see us get go back to a literary landscape or a creative landscape that is similar to that or even better. And maybe that is happening. Not there's some of us like me who push back, and there's some others who just they want to avoid the conflict, avoid the debate whatsoever, and just tell good stories. And I think there's a place for all of that, and I'm really excited to see it happening. And I hope it maintains the momentum it seems to have right now.
yeah, as do I. And I mean, I think the other thing is like with, you know, with some of the, corporate media going the way it has, you mentioned, the old stories that you, grew up with. Like, I think there's also a lot of us who are kind of discovering that old media because there are a lot of passionate archivists. So, like, the Mac Bullen, series, for example, that, that started way back during the Vietnam,
Yeah,
war era. A lot of people, I guess, just in general, don't know that was what inspired the Punisher initially. But now, people are kind of
absolutely.
rediscovering
It
that,
was a
and
ripoff, big time. Yeah,
yeah. So they still haven't made like I guess they've passed the rights around, for the Mac Bullen series, to be produced by
I
different
heard something
studios.
about that recently. But what do you know? I'm interested to know what the deal is with that.
I mean, I haven't heard much, but like the last I heard was um that like um initially what they were going to do was I know that oh, I can't remember the guy's name who uh anyway, the creator of Macball, and I know back in the 70s um gave the rights to one of the studios, and then basically it expired, and then I think like Clint Eastwood or someone picked up the rights in the 80s, and
Really?
then basically like the Matt Bolan series has been passed around to different
Yeah.
studios but just never gotten produced. And last I heard, like Taylor Sheridan may be interested in doing something with it, who did the Yellowstone, but
Hmm.
that's the last I heard. I don't know if that's
Now, is
going to
Taylor
happen.
Sheridan a screenwriter or a director? Shame on me for not knowing, but I did start watching 1923.
Both actually. He, I don't know as much of the man's background. He was on a
Okay.
podcast with Joe Rogan about like a year or so ago. He's kind
Oh,
of
really?
like he's kind of like Hollywood's, I guess. I wouldn't say like accepted right wing guy because the critics like hate his ass, but he,
Oh, well, must be a good guy.
yeah, I mean, but he's the one who's created Yellowstone, and basically, basically like the fan reception to Yellowstone and all of his other series has been so overwhelmingly positive that they, at this point, he kind of has like, as some of us like to say, he not only has fuck you money, but he has fuck me money, so they can't really, um,
Yeah,
they can't really touch him, which is good. I hope he gets
interesting.
the Mac Bowen series, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see if that gets off the ground.
I wonder how he snuck in through the cracks. And that reminds me, you were asking me for specific inspirations before. And
Yeah,
in
yeah.
cinema, uh, my favorite director, and I'm not sure if he's still alive because he did have a stroke uh, a while back, but that's John Milius. And of course, he's the one
Oh
who.
my God, yeah, I love Milius.
Okay, all right, cool. Yeah, he was my and how. Of course, he got grandfathered in a little earlier because when he started working in Hollywood, it was still acceptable to have, uh, a diversity of opinions.
Yeah,
And he was friends with Coppola and Lucas and all that crowd that came, Spielberg and all that crowd then. Um, and they did not unfriend him because he had a different worldview. But he did some. He did, of course. Uh, I don't think Red Dawn was a cinematic masterpiece, but I was happy as hell that he did it. But Hollywood never forgave him for making that movie. And with how toxic it is now, I wonder if this guy Taylor Sheridan, if he's another Milius, it's first of all, it's really impressive that he got to where he can do this. How
yeah,
he got to the point he's at now would be a fascinating story unto itself. And I hope he. I don't know. I don't know. I've only watched one season. They've only got one and part of a season of 1923, and that's all I know about his work. So I shouldn't even make any assumptions about him now. But
no,
he does. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'll send you the link to the podcast and some other stuff that I've found on him, and in regards to John Milius, I am glad that you brought him up because Milius is someone who I would say is also an influence on my work, but because nobody really knows who he is, he's not someone who I think off the top of my head always when people bring him up. And you're right. I mean, Red Dawn is not a masterpiece. Um, it's not like I wouldn't say it's like Godfather levels of epic, but compared to a lot of the stuff that's out there now, even a lot of like the mid-tier movies are, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
now masterpieces. RoboCop being like another
All right. Yeah.
one of them too.
Yeah. The
Any of
mediocre movies from yesteryear are suddenly fantastic. Uh,
Yeah.
because their competition has sunken so low.
Well, I remember when I was a kid. I always loved Mel Gibson's films, and this is kind of before I was. I mean, I was somewhat politically aware, but not as much. But I remember like I really started to like Mel Gibson's films, and I think it was like an adult or something was like, well, he's a racist, right? And I'm like, I didn't know that, and of course, I don't, he's not, but they were just, they didn't like him, and I'm like,
Yeah, that's based on.
I just like his movies, and now I've read more interviews with him. I like him as a person too. So
If I understand correctly, that whole. Of course, they call everyone a racist. If you have any opinion that they disagree with, you're a racist. Um, but that's, as I remember it, that came in from he was had a drunk driving incident or something, and he let some expletives go when he was arrested, and some of them were racial epithets, and I think specifically anti-Semitic. But I mean,
Yeah.
who even knows if that's true? It might be just because people were so pissed at him for making the Passion of the Christ that
Yeah. I
maybe
mean,
they just made stuff up about him.
I
But I'm glad you
think.
mentioned him because that's another influence. The Road Warrior, one of my
Oh,
all-time
yeah.
favorites, and one of the biggest reasons why I really enjoy the post-apocalyptic genre is because of that movie.
Yeah. That's a tough one to watch, but it's a great one.
You think so?
Y-
Does it, is it like disturbing or something?
well, I mean, I haven't seen it since I was a kid, but I remember, like, when I was like, 11, 12, I was like, man, this is really, gritty. I'm sure if I saw it now, I would be like, it's, it's not that bad, but it does kind of hold up, the post-apocalyptic thing.
Your
So
mission, Sam, should you choose to accept it, is to watch it again and then let's talk about it.
yeah, I mean, there. I will say this too. There's definitely a lot, there's definitely a lot grittier stuff out there now too. But yeah, I mean, I mean, oh, Mel Gibson. I think even like Braveheart has aged incredibly well.
Mm, yeah. And The Patriot, very underrated movie. There's so much hate for The Patriot online, um, but I rewatched it recently, and I'm a lot more impressed with it now than when I first saw it.
Yeah,
It's really strong filmmaking.
I I'm kind of surprised that like people hate the Patriot because I've literally watched that like every 4th of July since I was
Oh, really?
um a kid. I mean, it's a classic.
Yeah. Well, the reason why they hate it, the reason, because they hate America. Anything that's
Yeah.
like a positive message about America is like bad thing.
Yeah, well, that's starting to kind of, I think fortunately kind of, do a bit of a reversal. I think Americana is back in style, even if the corporate media doesn't want it to be.
Well,
You
I
know,
hope you're right. There are some signs that may be the case. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Anyway, sir, I don't want to keep you, for too much longer if you have other things to do, but I really appreciate your time. Where can people find your, stuff, and where can, people just find you on social media if they want to get a hold of you or anything?
Okay, so my blog is at virtualpulp.net, and of course it's mostly a review site. We review fiction, sometimes movies, sometimes comics, sometimes that's pretty much it. Those three. Since Christmas of 23, I've had the help of the infamous reviewer Geo, who's really been uh, great at reviewing, and he's got a penchant for fantasy, so there's been a lot of reviews of that since he came on board. Um, Unfortunately for me, uh, he was one of those rare readers who are not also creatives. Those unicorns that we try to find so we can get them to read our books.
Right.
But now he's dipping his feet into. He's actually working on a project now. So he's probably not going to be able to review as much as before. Um, and by the way, he's doing a good job, especially for a first effort. It's the subject matter is not something I would normally get into, but he's building strong characters, and he's writing a story that's making me turn pages. I do set aside time to do that for him because he's helping me out with the blog. So virtualpulp.net is you can contact me through there. You can see me spewing my opinions occasionally about other creative stuff. Not as much recently, and I week after week goes by, and I just don't have time to review anything anymore, or almost anything. You can find my books, of course, all my books, the ebooks and Paperbacks are on Amazon. The ebooks are available in every store. And I don't just have novels. I have some shorter stuff. Like if you want a sample of some shorter fiction I did that like will give you like a full force in your face uh, example of when my politics do come through. There's like a novella linked story called Street Fighting Man, which
Huh?
is available in ebook
Yep.
that you can check out. Just for one. There's other stuff. I did a retro pulp boxing story under the house name of Jack Tunney. There was a bunch of people in the Fight Card series who were writing under that name, and I did one. So there's that. And I have other short stuff. You can find me. I am on X, but I don't spend a lot of time there. I spend more time on Substack. So I do have a couple Substacks. One is Henry Sneak Peeks, where I share excerpts from my prose and occasionally a panel or some imagery from the graphic novel I'm working on. And then there's Iron Age Unfolding, where I pontificate on stuff related to creative matters, occasionally a political rant.
Yeah.
So those two are a good place to find me. I'm going to be in the near future, God willing, I'm going to be like within the next few months, I hope I'm going to be able to start sharing some of my graphic novel for free on the website. I have to build a landing page and stuff like that. But right now I'm still busy trying to get enough pages ready so that I can release it consistently and not fall behind while I still have to work on more. My handle is Machine Trooper at whatever social media I'm on, whether it's Gab or X or Substack. And I don't go to MeWe anymore. And I think I do have a YouTube channel, but there's not much on it, and I don't use it regularly. So there's that. And I think that's about it. You can find me through
Yeah.
those places.
So, well, that's awesome. I'm banned off of YouTube. This podcast is gonna go on, Spotify and all the podcast platforms, but then also on Rumble, which is where I'm active. And I am trying to get like more authors to kind of, go over there too, because I don't, I think book, I think even on YouTube, like book channels are kind of niche, and then, like Rumble in general is still starting out. So like, even though I'm not like a huge, author, you know, in general, like I guess I'm kind of like, as far as authors go, I'm a big fish in a small pond on uh, Rumble.
On Rumble. And I do like going to Rumble because I don't like the thought cop, the thought policing that's done on YouTube.
Yeah, well, I mean, they don't. Yeah, well, I mean, they don't like my, they don't like my, stuff either, and I haven't even said anything, about controversial. They basically banned my channel, and then they never gave me they said terms of service violations, but they never told me which terms I've been violated. It's
That's
you
what they
know
do because they can't. I guess they're not bold enough to put in their user agreements that if we disagree with you ideologically, we're going to can you.
yeah.
So they can't cancel you because of anything you've said or done. So they'll just say you violated terms of service, and they'll never specify what it was because they believe that you have opinions that they disagree with.
Yeah, but I'm doing okay without it. I still go to YouTube to watch stuff, but like as far as putting my content out there, like, would it help? Maybe, but I mean, a lot of my audience is on X and Substack anyway, so I'm doing fine without it. And it seems like you are too. You've got a good following, and I'm happy to have you on and introduce you to my audience as well. So thank you for coming on.
And
Really
I thank you
appreciate it.
for that. Yeah, I really appreciate you
So,
letting me talk to them.
oh, any time, and when you're closer to doing the, you know, to, I guess, releasing the graphic novel, once you have something, I'd love to have you on so that we can talk more about the project, you know, a little more in
That
depth
would be
as
awesome,
well.
and I can share some art, you know, on a screen share or something, or
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. All right, Henry, well, I really appreciate having you on, and folks, I really appreciate having you guys tune in and listen. I'll be back for the live show Wednesday nights at 10 p.m. Eastern on Rumble, as always, and you can. I'll have links to all of Henry's, you know, socials and links where you can buy his books in the description on both the podcast and Rumble video. Appreciate you guys tuning into this episode, and we'll talk at you down the road. Take care and God bless.
The right to offend is not some pesky little part of freedom of speech that we have to put up with. It is the heart and soul and lungs of freedom of speech. It is the coursing lifeblood of human progress. It is the instigator of liberty and modernity and science and understanding. What a laughing stock today's student leaders are, that they can so casually dismiss the right to be offensive without realizing that their lovely, enlightened lives are the gift of individuals who gave offense. Offensiveness is not just something we have to begrudgingly accept. Offensiveness is the motor of human progress.
Thank you for watching the Whitfield Report live on the Right to Offend Media Network. Make sure to check out Sam's books on Amazon, Audible, and Kindle. You can follow Sam on X at SamW_NGC and the Right to Offend Media Network at RTO Media. Like, comment, subscribe, and share with your friends. And until next time, God bless, God save this great nation. God, freedom, legacy, in that order.